If you're ready, are you ready?
I am.
Okay,
Let's-
I hope you prepared. Because I know I did. All right.
Okay.
Question 1, Vlad.
Okay.
China's first domestically produced aircraft, the C919, took its maiden flight last week for Air China, the flag carrier of China. So the question is, can the Chinese company, Comac, compete with the heavyweights Airbus and Boeing in the global aviation space?
Yes, they can. They absolutely can, because just look at Chinese technology. Look at how China as a country developed their technology. They always try to compete. They always try to be competitive. They try to, and they succeed. Let me explain what I mean. First of all, if we look at the current situation with Airbus, with Boeing, and I would say that overall the aviation industry wouldn't mind to have a lot more competition. I think the overall market, global market, is not penetrated enough, and to have one or two big players, this would help globally. And I think China has all the resources to do this, probably except some of R&D background, but we'll deal with it later. Second of all, I think when we look at China's technological development, the key to success has always been to make it scalable, to make it, to make it more efficient in terms of production. They can use the cheaper labor. They can use the scale of their economy. They can use the scale of the labor that they have. So basically, this is what has been the key to success when we look at their big technological companies like Xiaomi, or you name it, right? So
Xiaomi, you mean Xiaomi, I guess, is that?
I'm not
just correcting
I don't
your
know
pronunciation.
How,
that's all.
I don't know how to pronounce
That's
it.
okay. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for.
Okay, cool. In Russian, we call it Xiaomi.
Okay. So you're going with
Yeah. Okay.
Anyways, continue. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead. So overall, my first point will be yes, and because China has some good economic benefits that they can utilize. I will fill with some more details later, but yeah, what do you think about it? You agree or disagree?
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you think it is possible, because I think it's more entertaining when we disagree, and I completely disagree.
Perfect.
So look, in theory, I think you're right. It is possible in some sort of conceptual way that it could happen, but there's a bunch of reasons why I don't think it ever will happen, and I really think it's sort of pie in the sky. So for, again, number of reasons, but to sort of defend what China's trying to do, first of all, I think it's a very smart move. If you look at, as you identified, you've got two main players in the global aviation space, Airbus and Boeing. You would think that it's ripe for a third disruptor to come in, provide that additional service, particularly on this line of aircraft, the C919, which is going to directly compete with the 737 MAX that Boeing has, and then the A320 that Airbus has. Okay. So those are the two fastest growing, that's the fastest growing airline segment. China looks like it's trying to break into that. Again, high level, looks positive. Now, okay. And then on top of that, you've got a lot of problems with Boeing 737 MAX. I mean, we can go through the actual, whether it's crashes, whether it's this, whether it's that. It's having a ton of problems. So again, ideally, on paper, it looks like this is a great opportunity for China, for this company to break in. Now, why I think it's not going to happen, maybe it never happens. What you need in order to be globally competitive. Now, again, China's a massive domestic aviation market on its own. I'm not saying it can't be successful in China. Will it displace or compete with Boeing and Airbus, though? I don't see that. Because first of all, you're going to need to first go through the European and American, in America it's called the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. Europe it's called something else.
Authorities, let's call it.
Yeah, one of these authorities.
Agencies.
Yeah, you're going to need to get that certification first and foremost, in order to even be able to fly into Europe or the US, right? These are two huge aviation spaces. So then you go to, okay, there's a couple reasons why those two places in particular would be reluctant to give them authorization. Well, one being Airbus is in Europe, Boeing is in the US. So why would these two regions want another competitor to come in and theoretically take jobs away? Theoretically risk Boeing and Airbus's dominance? I don't really see the incentive there to make that happen. So then that already creates a problem for both Europe and the US. Then if you go to everywhere else, so what of these other markets would be keen to buy into Chinese technology or the Chinese aircraft if they're not going to be able to fly into the U.S. or Europe? So already that sort of creates a big pinch on the potential for this airline to grow. That's just point one. Point two is, of course, geopolitical risk and sanctions. So as we saw, you had Huawei, which was, again, one of the leading telecom companies in the world. I think they made up 11% global market share only in 2020. Trump and the U.S. government comes along, slaps sanctions on them. Now they're down to 3% market share just in a matter of 4 years. So that shows the power that the U.S., that the Europeans have if they want to go after, whether it be a company or anything like that, the power of sanctions, which again, I think sort of creates that headwind for their development. So with those things being considered, I don't really see how the airline can, for all, no pun intended, take off. And again, I just don't see why it would be in the interest of these two main markets to allow another competitor that is directly opposed from a geopolitical perspective. Yep. We see the budding issues between the Europeans, the Americans, and the Chinese. Yep. We see the growth in sanctions. I just don't see it, no matter how good the technology might be. For me, it doesn't make sense.
I think in your argument, you actually made two very good counter-arguments. So the first one, China is the largest domestic market, right? And they are now short 100 aircrafts. 100 aircrafts, and neither Airbus nor Boeing can provide it. So basically, first of all, they need to fill their own domestic needs, and I think this is where this COMAC will be super successful. Second is, let's not forget about the Asian market, where now, if COMAC goes international, they will have an opportunity to get the proper, normal quality aircrafts, potentially cheaper than like Boeing and Airbus. And this will be a huge upside for COMAC. That's why I guess this is where it can be really successful. This is where it can become successful. I'm not saying that tomorrow or like in upcoming 10 years, American Airlines will replace Boeings with COMAC. If they do, I think we will be living in a different world. Mm-hmm. But I think like big Asian airlines like Cathay, right? Cathay, yes. You know them better, like you're a specialist in the aircraft now, airlines. So basically some companies like that, they can benefit from it, and I think they will be very interested in COMAC.
Again, I think fair point. I mean, I don't disagree with you. Again, the economics in the market is there. I'm not disputing that whatsoever. And you have a very good point. They could locally, I think, make a lot of inroads. But another key issue, and I didn't mention this before, 60%. So 60% of the current C919s, so the current new plane, are locally sourced Chinese-made products. 40% are not. So the engines, the key highest order, sort of most difficult products or components of the aircraft to build are not domestically manufactured, which means if there's ever any sort of geopolitical issue, which we're seeing more and more these days, anything, and the Americans want to say, for example, like what the Americans have done with advanced chips, if the Europeans want to come in and say no more Huawei technology, if the Europeans, and particularly the Americans, want to say, we're not going to sell you these engines, we're not going to sell you X, Y, and Z, just like that, the growth of the airplane goes up in smoke. So again, while I agree the economics are there, and even you could have some domestic Asian success, unless COMAC is able to nationalize as much of the manufacturing as possible, again, this plane isn't going to fly. This company's not going to take off as far as I'm concerned. But do you have any further points on
this? Yes. Currently, I agree. They use the, I think, GE-based engine, right? Like produced by General Electric. However, and I remember it like when I was a student in international relations, we had like the course called like Chinese economy in the world economic crisis, something like that. And what we were told is like one of the key issues with the Chinese technological sector is they don't have enough R&D. And like this is actually your point, like half of your parts of your aircraft domestically created is not actually Chinese, right? At the same time, what are Chinese R&D companies very good at? They're very good in taking something that exists, copying it and enhancing it, or copying it and make it cheaper. This is exactly what they are doing with this engine, for example, because in 2019 they have already registered the engine itself, so they are trying to localize it, of course. And I saw like there is in 2021 they made it like official, so they have the working engine. However, yes, they still use the GE ones, but anyway, like they're going there. So I think this issue, like probably not tomorrow, but within the upcoming 3 to 5 years, I think they will solve it. So this, I agree, this is a very like pressing issue. And of course, like when I was reading about this aircraft they're trying to produce, and like when I read that half of it it's actually non-Chinese. In Russia, we have the same situation. Like they try to produce the Russian aircraft that turned out to be 70% European and American technologies. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that. But anyway, what they managed to do is basically they managed to create their own engine, and they will use it in upcoming years. So I think this issue will be solved.
So you're saying 3 to 5 years, and then you think these guys are going to be.
I'm optimist. Yeah,
you're an optimist. I'm not. So I think it's going to be. I don't think it's ever going to happen, to be honest. And again, I mean, I think whether it's in the interest of global competition, maybe, but based on everything that I'm seeing, again, getting through all these certifications, whether, again, it's all these parts that have to be made domestically, the politics, the geopolitics, all of this, I don't see it happening.
But I think you consider global market as like American and European markets.
Ah, okay. So you think I'm being biased because I'm American? Is that,
I'm not saying you're being biased. You said this. I haven't said that. Okay. But what I think is, let's not forget about the Asian market, like which is actually like 2 billion population. Okay, probably they don't have as many airlines and as many routes, but anyway, it's a huge market requiring good infrastructure. And actually, if you look at, for example, the ASEAN, right, the community of Southeast Asian countries, one of the key pillars for their development is to develop infrastructure, meaning transportation between these countries, and they require marine and they require the airfares. So I think it's a huge, there is a huge demand potential, and since it's the main area of interest for China, not only America, but like main area of interest for China, I think they have a good potential there.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely. I think it's a great opportunity for Boeing and Airbus, not for COMAC, because again, if we look at these countries, and it's a good point, most of these countries are American allies, right? So when it comes to geopolitics, which we've seen, whether it's Huawei, whether it's any of these other things, look at what's happened in Europe, right? The Americans came in and said, hey, UK, by the way, there's a lot of security concerns with Huawei equipment, all of this stuff. The British government comes in and says, by 2027, we're phasing out all of our Huawei equipment, and we're only going to be going with whatever other companies. So I think the same thing could theoretically happen, particularly when, again, it's the American and European companies that are providing 40% of this technology. Do you see Japan, a staunch American ally, going in and buying all these Chinese planes? I don't know about that. Do you see India, an American ally, going in and buying all these planes? I have my doubts. Do you see the Philippines? I understand what you're saying, Korea. I don't see it personally. I think that's a pretty clear sort of distinction we have. I don't think we're going to see eye to eye on that. But again, you see it happening. I don't. I don't know. Do you have anything else to add on that?
I think for Chinese company to become like a significant international power, it's already enough to conquer the domestic market and the regional market, and I think they have the whole potential for it. That's where I stand.
Where do you see their growth in Asia happening? With which countries?
So I think it doesn't need to be all these like. It doesn't need to be this geopolitical differentiation that where you say like the countries who are American allies, that they will use only American aircrafts. I don't see it that way. I think they will prefer the cheaper one. So my point is, if COMAC managed to make their aircraft considerably cheaper compared to Boeing that cannot provide their own demand right now, or considerably cheaper than the Airbus, they have a very good upside. I don't know, for Thailand, for Philippines, for Singapore, like these countries, they need more aircrafts. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they will use the geopolitical relations, international relations, in order to identify which companies which aircraft they should use for their airlines.
Yeah, look, fair point, and I think it could happen that way. All I'm saying is it will take one executive order, one signature from Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump to say no more of these parts are going to COMAC, and then suddenly what's going to happen? They got no planes, right? So that's what happens when 40% of those parts are being sourced externally, right? So that's the, I think, core issue. So China, in my opinion, would have to nationalize that industry. You'd have to make, again, 95, 100% of those parts internally, and then suddenly you don't have a problem. But I don't see how, when we've seen what happened with Huawei, when we've seen what happened with all these other sanctions, I think the world is moving into multiple zones of economic influence, and I think that's going to be a key vulnerability for the company. So you see it happening. I don't see it happening. I think we could leave it there unless you got anything to add.
Yeah, let's proceed. Let's proceed.
Okay.